On his longest foreign trip in a decade, Narendra Modi firms up India's place in the global south. Calling for unity among developing countries, the Prime Minister wraps up his 8-day, 5-nation tour in Namibia. But what does Modi want to achieve? And do BRICS and others in the global south view Modi as a common leader? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Narendra Modi. From Ghana to Trinidad, Argentina, Brazil, and Namibia, India's Prime Minister visited some key developing nations in what some are calling his effort to lead the global south. India is one of the world's top 5 economies per GDP, but many complain its persistently dire poverty rate means it shouldn't serve as a model for other developing countries. But Narendra Modi wants to change that, and he's also pushing the global south to form a united front to reform global agencies, including the IMF and the UN Security Council. Here's a look.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is wrapping up his 5-nation tour. On his longest foreign trip to date, Modi is trying to position India as a key partner of the global south. On the final leg, Modi arrived in Namibia, with critical minerals high on the agenda. Namibia is one of the world's largest producers of uranium, lithium, and rare earth minerals, resources India hopes to secure. Ghana, the other African nation on the itinerary, also has vast mineral reserves. The two sides have agreed to increase Indian investment in Ghana's mining sector. Modi was awarded Ghana's highest state honour, and bilateral ties have been elevated to a comprehensive partnership.
The two sides have engaged in significant discussions to deepen cooperation across various sectors of our economy, including agriculture, energy, manufacturing, infrastructural development, human resources, and health, amongst others. On the strength of the successful engagements, we have had a number of memoranda of understanding have been signed between Ghana and India.
His next stop was Trinidad and Tobago, a country that shares deep historical ties with India. Though 35% of its population is of East Indian descent, Modi became the first sitting Indian Prime Minister to visit the Caribbean nation. He pledged continued investment and signed agreements in health, energy and trade. In Argentina, Modi once again focused on minerals. India's foreign ministry said both countries have potential for expanded cooperation in the energy sector.
Argentina's rich reserves of critical minerals, including lithium, copper, and rare earth elements, align with India's need for secure and sustainable resources to drive its clean energy transition and industrial growth.
The BRICS summit in Brazil was the highlight of Modi's tour, where he outlined India's key priorities. He urged fellow leaders to condemn terrorism following the deadly attack in Kashmir in April. Modi also called for urgent reforms of global institutions like the UN Security Council, the IMF and the World Bank to give developing countries a stronger voice. Taking aim at China, he warned the group against the weaponisation of critical minerals. China currently controls 90% of global rare earths processing and imposed export restrictions on those elements in April.
We need to work together to make supply chains for critical minerals and technology secure and reliable. It's important to ensure that no country uses these resources for its own selfish gain or as a weapon against others.
Amid the ongoing US-China trade war, global economic uncertainty, and geopolitical conflicts, India is attempting to position itself as a credible alternative. Yet the race with China to lead the developing world won't be easy. Modi's tour has shown that India has much to offer and much to gain. But the question is, will it be enough to unite the global south?
So is Prime Minister Modi succeeding to elevate India on the stage of the global south? Well, joining me now to discuss that and more are from Toronto, former Indian ambassador and distinguished fellow at Gateway House, Rajiv Bhatia. From Rio de Janeiro, researcher at the International Intelligence Unit of the Getulio Vargas Foundation, Leonardo Neves. And from London, publisher at Africa Briefing Magazine, Jonathan Ofe-Ansah. Thanks all so much for being with me. Ambassador, I'll begin with you. You know, we're talking about this five-nation tour, and I know in India they're talking about it, but has it left a mark on, first, the nations Modi really wants to influence, and did it serve to unify the global South in any sense?
Thank you very much for this very pertinent question. I think this is a good time to ask it because the ambitious diplomatic odyssey of Prime Minister Modi is now finally at its last leg. It was a very ambitious tour lasting 8 days, covering 2 continents, 5 countries, and a major international conference. So yes, I would say it is very much close to achieving its goals. And yes, indeed, the fundamental goal was to demonstrate to the world that India has emerged as a major, active, and very inclusive global player on the world stage.
Close to achieving its goals? So what's missing?
No, nothing is missing. What I'm saying is that he is finally, he has arrived in the last country, Namibia, and the visit would unfold there. And therefore, this is the perfect time actually to make an assessment, because we know that the visit to Namibia would go off very well as well.
Okay, so in your opinion, once he wraps up his visit to Namibia, everything he wanted to achieve was achieved?
Well, I think, you know, this is not a perfect world. So whether he has achieved everything that he wanted to achieve, that is an issue on which judgment will have to come later. But 2 or 3 things I can point out specifically for the benefit of your viewers. The first was that this trip was centered around the 17th BRICS summit, and there were a lot of doubts about whether that summit would succeed. But I think due to a combination of factors, that summit has succeeded very well, and so that is a plus point. Then clearly the central leg of the visit was the state visit to Brazil. And there again, you know, reports that have reached me indicate that the visit was very, very successful and productive, resulting in a new warmth and a new substance in India-Brazil relationship. And then on the second aspect, I think this visit was centered on South America, something that has not been done in the past, covering 3 countries, Brazil, Argentina, and Trinidad and Tobago. You know, he's visiting as Indian PM these countries after, you know, in terms of bilateral visits after decades. So there is great excitement and success there as well.
I'll tell you what, let me first look at Africa. I mean, he visited Ghana first, then moved on to, he's obviously in Namibia now. And I'd like to ask Jonathan how you think African nations actually view India and Prime Minister Modi, you know, in light of this visit. Do they see India as a model?
I wouldn't say they see India as a model in those terms, not in the political narrative. But, you know, Africa is always looking to partner other countries, you know, in the fields of economy and so on and so forth. But what I think most Africans don't know is Modi's domestic record, you know, which actually has raised alarm, you know, internationally, you know, with the allegations of shrinking press freedom, misuse of anti-terror laws, and crackdown on dissent, you know, which suggests that India, under his rule, is veering toward authoritarianism. In fact, Human Rights Watch, you know, has criticized its government for using, and I quote Human Rights Watch, using broadly worded counter-terror laws to silence its critics and shutting down internet access and curbing foreign-funded civil society groups. It is so, annoying. I'm a Ghanaian, and I followed his visit closely last week, even reported on it. But critics, he addressed the Ghana parliament. And this is what his critics are saying is not on. Okay, I mean, they think that bringing such a leader into parliaments abroad, be it in Accra or Port of Sudan, risks, normalizing a model of governance that undermines democratic values.
So do you feel his leadership or his visit to Ghana did Ghana's leadership any favors, or did it actually agitate the public a little bit, seeing?
Well, not the public. Look, the majority of the Ghanaian public, I'm not sure, know the internal dynamics, within India, right? What the average Ghanaian wants is increase FDI, foreign direct investment, set up factories, and he made an announcement, that Ghana and India and Ghana will cooperate in the fields of medicine, industry, and tech and technology. So these are what the average Ghanaian wants, needs. So if he touts these things, yes, the Ghanaians would embrace him wholeheartedly.
Leonardo, let me ask you, Modi's presence at the BRICS summit in Rio, it was felt, but I have to ask you what was made of his messaging there, not least pushing to sanction terrorists. He didn't outright name Pakistan, but it was more or less understood. Was that the right audience to address that?
I do think yes. Andrea, thank you for the invitation again. I do think yes, because in the sense that BRICS now is somehow a platform where countries, as collective and as individuals, they can propel their voice. They can make their narratives listen to all the countries in the world. Because again, whenever you have a BRICS meeting nowadays, you can see President Donald Trump discussing it. You can see Europeans discussing it. So whenever you say something within summits as important, as notorious as BRICS is nowadays, yes, I do think that people hear your message.
Okay, I mean, what do you think they made of it? Because we have to remember that, countries like Russia and Iran are very much being sanctioned. And when you have one of the major BRICS leaders actually trying to promote further sanctions against other countries for a definition he feels of terrorism, does it risk turning the Global South and the BRICS Forum in particular into something that becomes too politicized?
Well, BRICS is a political association, yes. Of course, BRICS is a very different animal from everything that we have seen before. I mean, people tend to connect BRICS with European Union. I think it's a mistake. People try to relate BRICS to G7, which makes a little bit more sense. The thing is, BRICS is not something that was created spontaneously and organically. It was a creation of countries that united, and somehow their expansion is creating some edges in the sense that many different countries have different ideas, and those ideas were not agreed or not harmonized before the creation of the group. So yes, I do think that we have some trouble during not only the speech of Prime Minister Modi, but also from Brazilian part whenever you talk about the reforming of the Security Council of the United Nations. So yes, we have some edges in some voices of the members, but I think in overall, countries within the BRICS, they try to water down some of their critics. They voice their critics, but they do not point fingers in a way that they sense they could not make a very aggressive statement.
Okay. Let me ask Ambassador Bhatia. It's interesting that Leonardo was saying that, BRICS it's not the European Union, not quite the G7, but we're hearing some analysts say that this is, in a sense, BRICS is the permutation of the non-aligned movement, that it will have that kind of influence. Do you think that's a good parallel there?
Well, I think BRICS is obviously a unique institution, but I think what you just said makes some sense. Actually, President Lula, in his opening remarks, at the plenary session did indeed say that BRICS is the heir to the non-aligned movement. Now, non-aligned movement has not gone away. It is still there. It has more than 100 members. But BRICS is now, in my assessment, in the process of transition. It began with 4 and then 5 countries, and now it has become an association of 11 countries with 10 countries as partners. So obviously it is growing. It is nowhere near in the terms of size of the non-aligned movement, but it is obviously very much devoted to the idea of representing the global south, the new term for the developing countries. And India certainly was using this diplomatic tour of Prime Minister Modi to push forward the idea that the global south has a very clear agenda and cooperation program, that India is the voice of the global south, a major leader of the global south, and the two pillars, Latin America and Africa, must be taken care of. And with your permission, if I may just make a point, I have spent many years in Africa. I respect what your panelist from London has said, but I do not agree with him. I want to make it very clear that India's image in Africa is very positive. African countries look at India as a very successful democracy. If that would not be the case, Mr. Modi would not have received such a warm and friendly welcome in Ghana and Namibia. I mean, countries are lining up to offer the highest civilian awards on him. They are extending the courtesies of a state or official visit, and the number of bilateral agreements which are getting signed and which are bound to be implemented optimally shows that India's stock and image in Africa as well as in Latin America is very high today.
Okay, Jonathan, I'll let you respond because you were intimating slightly that the leadership doesn't necessarily align in how they respond to foreign visitors, doesn't necessarily align with how the public feels, including yourself as a Ghanaian.
Yeah, I think Ambassador, misunderstood what I said, or maybe he's taking it out of context. What I mean is that, look, the average Ghanaian, the average African, does not know what goes on, the internal political dynamics within India itself. Doesn't know that. Okay, what the average African, the average Ghanaian needs, wants, is looking for, is investment. I mean, look, I grew up in Ghana, born, bred, and tutored in Ghana. Look, when I was growing up, by the time I left Ghana about 40 years ago, there were a lot of Indian businesses in Ghana, in Accra, Kumasi, where I grew up, all over the place. And even now, we have a lot of Indian businesses in the country contributing to the economy. Okay, so this is what Ghanaians want. But what I mean is that the average Ghanaian does not know what is going on inside of India. That is my point. Look, he did address Ghana's parliament, and he declared that, and I quote what he said, that India has over 2,500 political parties. Okay, and it is the mother of democracy. Yes, India is the world's largest democracy, right? But there are claims that what he said to in the Ghana parliament, it was a claim that glosses over the troubling democratic trends at home in India. You see, and people calling it political theater intended to distract from the suppressed, decent, and weakened institutions in India. The average Ghanaian doesn't know much about this. What the average Ghanaian wants, cares about, is to get the investment. And India, is able and is ready to invest in Ghana, to partner with Ghana in the fields of economic, social, and so on and so forth.
Okay. The clock is actually against us. I need to get to a few other things. So let me ask Leonardo. One of the key points that Modi made was that he criticized what he sees as, he called it the weaponization of critical minerals, which many saw as a very obvious jab at China. He wants mineral supply chains, to be fully available to all. But do other global South nations agree with his stance there? Because it was a critical point for him to make in India's interest. because it's working in a free market. And if China needs the supplies it needs to keep its manufacturing base going, are other nations okay with that, especially if they're supplying those critical minerals?
That's a very difficult question because more or less the world right now is divided between China and US in the access to these resources. I mean, the way that countries have been outsourcing and giving concessions of their mineral rights all over the world between the US and China is being noticed by everybody. The thing is that China nowadays has the processing power which is way more advanced than US. So you have countries in general having selling the rights to China with buying. Right now, we have seen in the news how the U.S. is trying to do the same with Congo, with Ukraine, using their conflicts as a leverage to access those minerals. So yes, it's difficult to the countries in the south that they rely on these minerals to achieve their development, to achieve resources to achieve that development. They are in a position that they cannot process the minerals, they lose the money, and so they have to sell to the price bidder in that sense. And by doing so, they are somehow entering a geopolitical game between China and US.
Okay, Leo, I'm having a bit of trouble hearing you there, but let me move finally back to Ambassador Bhatia, because one of the other critical points Modi made that many pointed out was a change of position for India, was that he condemned the strikes on Iran before this global audience in the global south. And he hasn't really done that before because many saw that, he wanted India to be able to stay neutral. Is that not the case for India anymore?
The question is not of neutrality. I think the question is that there is a fundamental conflict of approach or approaches in the Middle East. And there, it is for India to show some lead in terms of navigating the fundamental paradoxes. As you know, Iran is now a member of BRICS. And when a member of a body, of a grouping, receives the military strikes from two countries, then obviously that country, Iran, expects much greater support from the grouping when the grouping holds its annual session. This is exactly what happened in Rio de Janeiro. And BRICS ended up indicating that support for Iran. And this was possible, obviously, because of the consensus that emerged at the official and political level. As far as India is concerned, both on Ukraine as well as on the Iran issue, the basic message from Delhi is that, look, it is natural for countries to have disputes and differences. But what is the way to resolve those disputes and differences? India believes that the approach is one of diplomacy and dialogue. It is not the use of force. It is not the use of violence. And I think BRICS made this point in its 126 paragraph long communique that the global south is facing real challenges of development, of climate change, of digital transformation deficit,
Yes.
Financing for development and the rest of it. So it's important for the international community to focus on the real issues and resolve the differences peacefully.
Yeah.
The issue is whether others are listening to it.
You mentioned there, and let me just get Leonardo's very quick final words on this, because speaking of climate change and what developing nations are up against, Brazil and India really focused on what they could do jointly to fight that battle. Did that go noticed widely in Brazil?
Okay, I think the climate agenda is very significant in Brazil, and whenever you have a country that is supporting, is voicing support to our efforts and showing that their efforts also significant, it's important to us. So yes, the message of Prime Minister Modi resonates very well in the Brazilian media in that sense.
What are people expecting to see done, though, on that front, tangibly so?
Yes, people believe that they should have more tangible, concrete positions. But again, most of the expectations of those concrete initiatives, or at least funds in general, comes from the West. People believe that somehow developed countries, the northern countries, should be able to flip the bill and help countries like Brazil and India to help other least developing countries in more tangible initiatives.
Okay. Well, that will have to be then the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with me, our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.